Orders. And of course, I'm joined by a team from the Judicial Service Commission. I'll start by introducing Mr. Samuel Mungisa, who's the Acting Registrar, Legal, Education, Public Affairs and Research. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pass. Good morning, viewers.
Right. And then, of course, I have Ms. Patra Alinda, Legal Officer, Legal, Education, Public Affairs and Research.
Thank you, Pass, for having us.
It's Shafiq.
Yeah. Thank you for having us today.
All right. I will start with the item on the table. Who is entitled to own property? I'll start with Sam.
Thank you very much, Pass. But before we
answer
that,
yes.
let our viewers know where we are coming from.
Yeah.
We are coming from the Judicial Service Commission, and one of the functions of the Judicial Service Commission is to prepare and implement programs for the education of judicial officers and the public about law and administration of justice. And we come in that line. Maybe if, in case we forget, we need to tell them where we are located.
Yeah, sure.
We are located at Kingdom, Kampala, 8th floor. That's where our head office is. We have regional offices in Moroto, Masaka, and Mbarara. And we can be reached on a toll-free number 0800-100-221. And in case you want to send an email, you send to info@jsc.go.ug. You can also visit our website, www.jsc.go.ug, for more information.
Yeah.
Now, you are asking as to who is entitled to own property in Uganda. We've heard it many times that there are categories of people who feel that they have no right to own property. But our Constitution guarantees a right to every person to own property. Every person. That means male or female, young, old, of whatever distinctions we might have. So without exception, every person in Uganda is guaranteed of a right to own property. Similarly, every person's right to property is protected. So no one should be deprived of his right to the property he owns, except in circumstances which are clearly stipulated out for public use, for security or health purposes, or when that deprivation or compulsory acquisition is done in accordance with the law and the owner has been adequately and fairly compensated before the property is taken over. Those are the only instances where a person can be deprived of his property. So, to go back to your question, is everyone in Uganda is entitled to own property.
So, and the issue of land, to whom does land in Uganda belong?
Land belongs to all the citizens of Uganda. Like Mr. Mungisa rightly stated, it is held under 14 years. We have the Milo land, we have the freehold, we have the customary, and we also have the leasehold. So the customary, unlike the three other ones, there is no certificate of title. That means with freehold, leasehold, and Milo land, there is a certificate of title. So we are dealing with registered land. Customary law binds customary land tenure. Freehold, Milo, and leasehold is governed by the laws because it is a registered land, and therefore we are going to have legal interests, and sometimes you're going to find we have equitable interests on the same piece of land. Now, For purposes of, we know our topic today is protection
Yeah.
of lawful and bona fide occupants. So we are going to later see that when we look mainly at Milo land, it creates a separation of ownership from separation of utilization or development of the land. While with customary land, you may have ownership and utilization of the land. Freehold, you have perpetuity. You can use the land, you can own the land. Leasehold, there is someone who is using the land and who has been given the permission to use the land. But now, Milo land, there is separation of ownership and separation of utilization or development of this land. Yes.
Would you say those are the big differences in the tenure systems altogether?
Yes, those are the differences. We see that with customary land tenure, you don't need to have a certificate of title, while the others you have. The three have perpetuity, but with Milo, there is a distinct feature, which is separation of ownership from separation of utilization. Hence, what will take us to our next, which will be who are these people that have utilization, but they are not actual owners of the land.
Mr. Sam, would you like to add on that, the differences between a customary, freehold, Milo land, and lease tenure systems?
Yeah, just to add a little to what she has said. The three, freehold, Milo, and leasehold, have titles. Customary does not have a title. The predominant tenure in Uganda is customary. So those with titles are fairly few. And going to the focus of our discussion today is that you will find that it is on these three where there are titles that you are going to find a lawful or a bona fide occupant. And the distinction is going to come in the way that they got their rights. In the way they got their rights. So you have Milo, you have freehold, and you have lease. Some people went and acquired leases over land, which was occupied by some other people. So those people who remained on, what is their interest in such a piece of land? So that will be our discussion today.
So because there are certain terms you're using, and I'm sure people are now very curious to find out who is a lawful occupant and who is a bona fide occupant.
Yes.
Let's start with Patrick.
Okay, so let me first break it down for the viewer who doesn't understand maybe the complex English. So when we say lawful occupant or bona fide occupant, at the back of your mind, these are tenants on land, usually referred to as vivanja holders. Who is a lawful occupant? Now, previously there were repealed laws, the Busulu and Imvujo law, the Toro landlord and tenant law, the Ankole landlord and tenant law. Now, if you owned land by virtue of these repealed laws, and you're on that land, you have no certificate of title to the land, but you own this land as a result of the repealed laws that I have stated, then you are a lawful occupant. Secondly, if you are on land by the consent of the registered owner, I have land, I have a certificate of title, that means this land is registered. But there is another person who is on this land, probably they purchased this land and they have no certificate of title. Probably transfer of ownership has not yet passed on. They are a lawful occupant. And then the third, you had occupied land as a customary tenant, but your tenancy was not disclosed or compensated for by the registered owner at the time of acquiring a registrable interest. So to simplify it for people, we are looking at you on this land, either Milo land or freehold land or leasehold land. You have interest in it, but you have no certificate of title. Under these three categories that I have mentioned, then you are a lawful occupant, or a tenant by occupancy, or a chibanja holder. Now, the other option, the other term is a bona fide occupant. Who is a bona fide occupant? A bona fide Now, before the coming into this constitution, the supreme law of the land, which is the 1995 constitution as amended, we have people who were on land. The constitution was enacted on the 22nd of September 1995. So you were on this land 12 years before and more. You become a bona fide occupant. You had been settled on this land by the government or an agent of government. You are a bona fide occupant. Hence, now these are the tenants by occupants that are protected by law. We need to emphasize that there are people that are not protected by law. For example, squatters, they are not under the definition of either a lawful occupant or a bona fide occupant. If you are renting premises, you're renting land for agricultural products, you're not a bona fide occupant or a lawful occupant, and therefore you can only be protected if you take it upon yourself and take reasonable steps to look for the registered owner.
So there's a term you've used, squatter. Who is a squatter?
Who is a squatter?
Yeah.
A squatter is someone who comes and enters and occupies land without being known by, first of all, you're not known by the registered owner. The registered owner does not know you. You do not you do not fall under these categories. You are not on this land because of the repealed laws. You are not on this land before the coming into force of the 1995 Constitution for 12 years, uninterrupted by the registered owner. And you have not even dared to look for the registered owner who has the certificate of title.
So you're a squatter.
So you're a squatter.
So in a scenario, so what if for a person has occupied a place, is coming as a squatter and for 20 years, and that's when the person comes back, the actual owner. So don't they have claim?
No, they do not have claim because you're not protected by law. We are looking at these people. That is why we request that if you're in such a bracket, please look for the registered owner of the land and enter into negotiations on how you can be able to pay the annual nominal ground rent, and probably can become a bona fide or lawful occupant in that circumstance.
So I want to go to Mr. Samuel. Who is not a lawful and bona fide occupant, like in your terms? Like you can just break them down for us.
Okay. The one who's not lawful or bona fide is precisely the squatter. And the squatter is that person who enters land without the permission of the landowner.
So there are people who just come and settle.
Yes. You remember where we started from. Protection of property rights. If I own my land, you can only enter that land with my permission. If you don't, you are infringing on my rights and you're a squatter. Those are the ones who will be evicted when you go to court. Now, there are these kinds of people who enter the land with the permission of the landowner. For example, you invite someone to come and work for you. You give him a piece of land to live on and possibly raise his family from there, put a shelter. But he's your worker. That person cannot be a bona fide or lawful occupant because he came there with the permission of the landowner. We call it a license. You came on the land under the license of a landowner. Someone might ask to use the land for a limited purpose, maybe for business or for something, and you allow him to work on your land. Then he doesn't become a lawful or a bona fide occupant, even if he has spent there 12 years or more. Maybe that's why I need to add when we are talking of a bona fide occupant, because there is the element of time. A person who has stayed on the land for 12 years before the coming into force of the Constitution. That is before the 1995 Constitution was promulgated. So when you're counting the 12 years, you should count backwards from 1995, September 1995 backwards, which takes you to 1983. So if a person had occupied the land by 1983, then that one will qualify to be a bona fide occupant. Or if he acquired his interest from one who qualified, to be a bona fide occupant, that one also will be. But you don't come in at any time. For example, now it's 2025, you say, but I've been on that land since 2013. You don't qualify unless you acquired your interest from a person who qualified as a bona fide occupant or a lawful occupant, and you did it legally. That is very important. You know, in our country, land is one of the biggest purchases a home can make, a family can make. And it takes really a long time to own land. So part of the cheaper bit of the real estate are the Bibanja lands. So when a person manages to save some little money, he can find some money, he buys Chibanja, but he doesn't do it in the way the law demands that it should be done. That's where the problem is. So a person says, me about my Chibanja, especially here, we know Kawaka's land. Many people have been occupying that kind of land, and they bought Bibanjas. But if you have not followed the procedure prescribed by the law, then that's where there is a problem. And that's why we are here, particularly on this topic, to cause awareness among the people that, yes, it is true in Uganda you can have a Chibanja. It is true that you can be protected on your Chibanja, but then there are some legal procedures, imperatives you must abide by in order to have that protection of the law.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, who is a tenant by occupancy?
A tenancy by occupancy.
Yeah.
We have used three terms which mean nearly the same. Lawful occupant, bona fide occupant, those are the tenants on the land of the owner. So by law, they become tenants by occupancy. Because they are occupying, they become tenants of the landlord. Now, in our common language, common use, those are the people who are commonly known as Bibanja holders. So if we say lawful, bona fide, Bibanja, tenant by occupancy, we mean the same thing. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So how are these people protected?
So the Constitution has, and the other laws such as the Land Act and the Registration of Titles Act have put measures to protect these tenants by occupants, or lawful and bona fide occupants, or Bibanja holders that we are all referring, using different words, but to mean the same people basically. So one of the ways how they are protected by law, they have security of occupancy. What does this mean? This means that, first of all, their occupancy is unlimited. You can be on this land for as long as you live. Even your children can inherit that from you. So one, they have security of occupancy, and they can only be evicted for failure to pay the annual ground nominal rent.
So there's a payment?
Yes, there is a payment. Because there is a registered owner. You're on this land, there is an actual owner who has the certificate of title for you in this land, but you do not have a certificate of title. That is why there is an annual ground nominal rent. And even one of the protection is that even as you pay this rent, it must be reasonable and actually provided for by law. We have regulations that have provided for the different rent for the different areas. You'll find that maybe people in the city areas pay quite higher than people in the rural areas, so that everyone is able to develop land, utilize land without being to feel like they are suffering because of the law. Another one is that they can inherit this land, they can pass on the land to the next generation. If you're a Chibanja holder, you can actually pass it on to the next generation. He spoke about the bona fide occupants. Definitely someone who has been on land by 1983. Right now we may have one or none, but we may have descendants of the person who occupied land as a result of the coming into force, before the coming into force of the Constitution. Another one is that they can only they are entitled first option to purchase this land. If the registered owner wants to sell the land, then they have the entitlement to be the first purchasers of this land. Before he can sell to other people, they should be asked, can you afford this land? If they can afford this land, then they are entitled to first purchasers of the said land. Yes. So those are some of the measures that have been put under our laws to protect the lawful and bona fide. And it goes back to the same thing that they are protected because you're on this land, you've been there for a long time, you have developed it, you have utilized it, but you have no certificate of title. The certificate of title belongs to another person.
Well, a question will arise in terms of, you talked about inheritance. Like if a person inherited the land, but it was Mabanja, is it also, are they protected? Though there was an understanding between the parents before they left and the landlord.
Yes, they have to, they are protected by law because that is one of the protection measures. If my father was on the land as a Chibanja holder and I inherit it, I am equally protected. The only thing I have to do is to look for the registered owner and ensure that I pay the annual ground nominal rent so that I am protected by law, because eviction only happens for failure to pay. But even this eviction, there must be a court order. And even the court order must come after 1 year of notice. The landlord must write to me a year after I have failed to pay so that I can be able, whether to notice to show cause why I should not be evicted from the said piece of land or the same Chibanja that is in dispute.
So I want to give you a scenario. I know a lot of homes that who are being built around Kampala, but they don't know who the landlords are, but they are Chibanja holders. In a scenario like that, after years and then the actual owner comes back, don't they face, are they also protected?
They're also protected. They're also protected as long as they qualified. What is important here is when the owner surfaces and finds people and they say we are Banja holders, his entitlement is to ask for rent, annual nominal rent. And that money is not a lot of money. It is really nominal, an assurance that there is a legal relationship between the people. That's why before you can evict a tenant by occupancy, you have to first apply to court that this person has failed to pay rent, and then the person will be summoned by court. Court will inquire into it and will give him adequate time to pay up. It is only in the event of failure that court will make an order for the person to be evicted.
Yeah.
But the other thing is in terms of rent, if the person cannot find the landlord, or if the landlord refuses, because the money is small, many people are not interested in small monies.
Speaking of the money,
yeah. So if it's not, if the rent is not taken or you don't know where to pay it, then the law provides that you apply to the permanent secretary responsible for the ministry for lands to approve that you pay that money in a prescribed account. Once that money is paid, it's as good as having paid to the landowner. The landowner, if he wants it, he will go and apply for it. But you keep your receipt or your deposit slip for that, and the obligation to pay the rent will have been discharged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the money is small. I wanted to find out, you see how land varies in different locations. How is that money of rent as well? Does it vary? If a person has a Chibanja in Gulu, is it the same amount for the person in Kampala?
No. The land boards in those areas are supposed to fix the rents, which are approved by the minister responsible for land. So you have to look at the instrument as to what has been approved for your area to determine the amount of money you're supposed to pay in annual nominal rent. Yes.
I wanted to ask you, what are the obligations of a lawful or bona fide occupant?
These obligations of a lawful and bona fide occupant, let me say, they are the risk factors why he might lose his Chibanja if he doesn't comply with them. One of them is payment of rent. That's what we've just been talking about, that you have an obligation to pay rent annually. It is prescribed, and if you refuse or if you fail after all steps have been taken, then there is no relationship. That is the first one. So the obligation is to pay rent. Find out who your landlord is or the landowner is. Find out how much money you are supposed to pay and pay it. If he refuses, use the alternative. Deposit it in a prescribed bank, just as I have said. That is number one. Number two is tenant by occupancy enjoys all the rights on the land, such as he can also sell his chibanja, he can mortgage it, he can pledge it, he can give it away as a gift. But all those, before you do them, you must get the written consent of the landowner. What happens if you do it without getting that consent is that that transaction is null and void. So the buyer takes no interest, and also you, the seller, you lose the interest. After all, you had already divested yourself of it to a third party. So what happens if the landlord refuses to give a consent? The law provides that you go to the district land tribunal. But the tribunals are not operational at the moment, so we advise that you go to court, and he's supposed to respond to you within 6 weeks. So if 6 weeks pass without a response or with a refusal, then you apply to court so that you can get that consent to be able to enjoy that right. The other obligation you have is you should not abandon the chibanja. Some people, as life happens, people keep moving, and so it can happen that a person has to leave that chibanja unattended. So if you leave the chibanja unattended for 3 years without leaving a relative, without leaving an agent on that kibanja, then you could lose it. But if there is a disability causing it, for example, you were arrested and put in prison, for example, you were sick and you are seeking some medication somewhere, any disability really that prevents you, that's reasonable, that prevents you from occupying and utilizing your chibanja, then you can, that period of 3 years can be extended. The other obligation the lawful occupant has, or a tenant by occupancy, lawful and bona fide, is you must give the first option to buy to the landowner. If you want to divest yourself of that chibanja interest, you must give that option to the landowner to buy. You cannot sell to any other person before you give the option to the landowner to buy that chibanja. Yeah. So I think those are good. They are good arrangements if they were really followed, because the landowner would take back his interest, or if he felt he didn't have the resources, the funds, then he can say you can buy. Then he's able to recognize the person who buys your interest.
So I wanted to ask Patra, what should law enforcement agencies do to protect lawful and bona fide occupants affected by evictions? Because those ones happen.
Yes, so usually when a registered owner comes to this agency, let's say for example police, and they are asking you to support them in evicting these people off the land, first of all, ensure that you find out who are these occupants. Are they by their status? Are they because they are lawful occupants? Are they because they are bona fide occupants, or they are squatters? If you want to evict them, was there a proper evaluation of this land? In case you want to demolish, were these people paid? Were they compensated? And even demolishing must not be done unless compensation has been made. If you want to evict them, is there a court order? And for how long was the court order given? Some people go to court on Monday and tomorrow they're evicting these people. These people must be given notice 6 months prior before they are evicted from land. In case we said the eviction should be only for failure, but even if they fail to pay the ground rent, there are steps. So have you followed the steps? Has this person followed the steps? You as an agency, these are the things that you should look out for. Another thing that people should look out for is the compensation adequate? Sometimes you want to evict people because you want to develop this land as a registered owner. Maybe it's in town, you think you want to put apartments, and these people are staying there. Maybe they cannot afford to put up a very good building. So you think, let me evict them, give them another place where they can go and settle. But you need to consider all these things. Have you given them the proper compensation amount that can take them to another place? So all these things, the agencies should look at them before they can evict these people off the land. Otherwise, if you do not follow these procedures and look at all these things, then you are said to have done an illegal eviction. And an illegal eviction is an offense that comes with, you can either be imprisoned or given a fine, or even both, imprisoned and given both a fine and an imprisonment. Yeah. Yes.
So Sam, same question, but a little bit different. How can people who have been evicted unlawful now report, or what are the procedures?
How can they?
If they are evicted unlawfully, I would say, not following the procedures she has explained, how can they report? How can they go about it?
As she has said, unlawful eviction is a criminal offense. So offenses are reported to the police. The first thing is you report immediately to the police, and the police will open a file and carry out investigations. And if they find indeed that this person did not get a court order, then he will be prosecuted. Number two, that entitles you to bring a civil claim against whoever has evicted you, to take back your property. Because we started by saying everybody has a right to property, and that right is guaranteed, including access to court. So once you are being deprived unlawfully, not in the circumstances we talked about, then you can bring a case in court, and the court will restore you, will give you back your chibanja with compensation for any damages that you might have suffered.
All right. As we wind up and in conclusion, I wanted to get some final words from each and every one of you. I'll start with Patra.
First of all, we implore people who are on land, either as lawful occupants or bona fide, or you're not sure of what category you're on this land, to find out, look for the registered owner. You can use the LC1 area, is it LC1 member of the area, and find out who the registered owner of this land is, so that you can be able to be protected by law, follow the rightful procedures. Illegal evictions, we do not encourage illegal evictions, but we implore people to also take reasonable steps to ensure that they are under the protection of the law, by being either lawful occupants or bona fide occupants, but not squatters. Because if you're a squatter, the law will not protect you once you're evicted from this land. Yes.
All right, thank you very much. And Sam, your last message to Ugandans this morning.
Thank you. One is that the legal framework in place provides for negotiations between the landowner and the tenant by occupancy. You can negotiate on how to use that land, because largely the owner does not use the land, though he owns it. So you can enter into mutually agreed arrangements that enables both of you to benefit. So it's lawful for parties to enter into negotiations. Also, the same framework allows a mediator to help the parties negotiate an amicable settlement. But when it fails, then the status quo remains. Number two, if we are patient enough, I can see a possibility of the Bibanja holders being able to buy themselves and owning titles for their Bibanjas. And also the landlords benefiting, if we are patient enough, meaning that either the landlord will have to wait for a very long time, or he can negotiate his way out fairly quickly. And with time, I think slowly, we can see even the concept of Bibanja phasing out. For example, you see the government initiative of buying the Bibanjas of absentee landlords, say in Chibale. They buy and they have distributed the titles to the tenants who are there. You see the initiative of Uganda, Uganda Land Board, Chapa Mongalo. You're a Chibanja holder, why don't you come and we negotiate and you get a lease? So if we are patient and we follow the law, that could be settled. But most importantly, the biggest challenge in our country now are these evictions, unlawful evictions. A person, when you buy land which already has an existing interest on it, you have to take it with those interests. But people buy Milo interest or freehold interest and they want to come and evict the Bibanja holders they have found there. That is unlawful. And I think we need to stop. We need to stop it so that we can live harmoniously, so that we can live in a peaceful society. That's what will help our country to develop.
All right, thank you so much, Patra and Samuel, for coming through from the Judicial Service Commission. And remember, if you want to reach them, the number is 0800 100 221, just in case you feel like you need a little bit of more guidance on what your rights are as a Bibanja holder and how you can actually transition, and if you've been unlawfully evicted at a certain point in time. Let me take a very short break. I'll return with Dr. Robin